let's continue. As we said, Unit 34. I forgot to say before, for the Menucha of Sir Moses Montefiore and Sir Naim Dangur. We're continuing Unit 34, talking about the issue of commerce and ownership change and presence on Shabbos and Yantiv. We saw previously, the last thing we saw just now is about the question of, are you allowed to hand over present on Shabbos and Yantiv without doing a special kinyan? If we want to go to the Achronim, the Bach and Magen Avraham say you're not allowed, and the Beit Meir says you are allowed to just give, as long as you're just giving it as a present, just handing it without doing a special kinyan. What we saw last week was that you're allowed to give presents on Shabbos and Yantiv. There was a four-way machloket here, and the bottom line was that when it comes to food, anything that is not that wouldn't require melacha, a melacha that you have to do on Yantiv, which is a lower bar, you're allowed to send on Yantiv. Presumably Shabbos would be the same. Anything you're allowed to use on Shabbos without a melacha that's asur on Shabbos, you're allowed to send on Shabbos. Of course, barring the issue of tiltul, barring the issue of if you don't have an eruv, you can't carry, so you can't send a present. That's as it applies to food. It applies to other things. We said the bottom line here was basically anything you could use without having to transgress a melacha. Right? That you can look at last week's video to see the relationship between these two. The three ways we said of reading the two braitot. Those are just pointing them out. Where are we? Here. These Mishnayot, these two Mishnayot. What's the relation with these two Mishnayot? We had three ways of reading them. We're saying that the second Mishnah is like Beit Hillel, second Mishnah like Beit Shammai. They're totally different. Begadol, that's what we had. Now, this takes us to the very relevant question of, do we give presents on Yantiv? Now, we just said we do give presents on Shabbos and Yantiv, and yet the Magen Avraham says, what is the justification of giving a chatan a present on Shabbos? Now, why is this a question? So the first solution, why is this a question at all? I think some of us already have an inkling, but I want to go through the Achronim. Now, the Beit Meir as we saw before, says as long as you're just handing the present to the other person, not doing the Ma'aseh Kinyan, it's never a problem. So the Beit Meir says, I don't understand the question for a different reason. The Magen Avraham's question, why can't you give a present on Shabbos and Yantiv? Just give it to the other person on Shabbos or Yantiv. It's not a problem. Just give it without doing a kinyan, and you're good. So that's the Beit Meir, right? True to his previous psak, says, therefore, that's the Magen Avraham's question, is not a question. But other poskim disagree, and we need to understand what is the issue exactly. So says the Eli Rabbah, because what's the problem? The problem is, we said before, you're allowed to give presents on Yantiv. Adrabah, you should be giving presents on Yantiv. Right? Presents on Yantiv is a good thing. We mentioned last time that the whole issue with sending mishloach manot on Purim is because we wanted Purim to be like Yantiv, right? Now, presumably Shabbos, we're also happy for that, and we saw that you're allowed to buy things and you're allowed to give things as present on Shabbos as long as it's for Shabbos. The problem here is that it's not really for Shabbos, is it? It's for the Chatan. It's for the Bar Mitzvah. It's for, right? It's not really for Shabbos. So the Eli Rabbah says, well, it's not really for Shabbos, but it's Tzorach Mitzvah. Now, is giving a Bar Mitzvah boy a present Tzorach Mitzvah? Is giving Chatan Kala a present Tzorach Mitzvah? He says, well, if he says a drasha, so it's for the Torah. If it's Chatan V'Kala, we have to make Chatan V'Kala happy. So he said you can justify calling it Tzorach Mitzvah. So again, he isn't saying it's Tzorach Shabbat, but we can still justify based on saying it's Tzorach Mitzvah. By the way, based on the previous sugya, we'd say once we call it Tzorach Mitzvah, right? If we want to go based on the Magen Avraham, we saw before the Magen Avraham says that after you define the Tzorach Mitzvah, still you have to do a low-key kinyan. And then the Beit Meir says the low-key kinyan works anyway, right? You're just allowed to give people presents by hand on Shabbos and Yantiv. It's not a thing. It's not a problem. The Eli Rabba says, well, once I turn it into Torah Mitzvah, then you can use that heter, right? Based on the previous Magen Avraham. First, you have to define as a mitzvah, then you could hand it over without doing a special kinyan. It says Aruch HaShulchan, יש מי שתמר מה שנותנים מתנות לחתן בשבת, אבל באמת אין איסור בזה. תמיקרי דבר מצווה, שהרי מצווה לשמח, חתן וכלה, וגם הצורך היום, ואחרי שהמנהג בשבת הראשון אחר הנישואין לעשות משתה, בזמן שמחה לחתן והכלה, ודאי מותר לשמחם במתנות. וכן מנהג ליתן להכלה אז מתנות, ואין בזה דרר דאיסור הכלל, ומנהג ישראל תורה. So he does something very interesting. He says, look, there's a Sephardi thing called, I don't see many Sephardim here, am I right? There's a Sephardi thing called Shabbat Chatan. And the Sephardim say Shabbat Chatan, they do not mean the same thing Ashkenazim mean when they say Shabbat Chatan. Right? They mean the Shabbos, it's what we Ashkenazim call Shabbos Sheva Brachos. Right? It's the Shabbat. Now, to have a Shabbat Sheva Brachot, is the Sheva Brachot really related to Shabbat? So you can say Vortim, right? You can say Vorts about why Sheva Brachot is connected to Shabbat, and I'll accept all of them. But fundamentally, it's not really part of the same thing. Elamai, we still say part of the Kavod Shabbat and part of the Oneg Shabbat that we have on that Shabbat is that we connected to the wedding, we connected to the Chatan V'Kala. Since we do that, we can also give presents because it's part of the Shabbos, right? You have a Shabbos program, right? Think about a Shabbos Sheva Brachos Shabbos program. So you have the Tefillot, you have the Seudot, you have whatever, right? And amongst other things, you have giving presents. It's part of the Shabbos, and that's good enough. You might argue again, the Magen Avraham's problem was, but that's not really for Shabbos. Say, no, it's part of the Shabbos program. It's okay. Right? I think that's what Aruch HaShulchan is saying. Some Sofer, a bit of a slightly different direction. L'Rav HaDorosh en safek, mishum da'avad doron l'chacham k'vod Torah v'tiferet v'chibuv mitzvah. Right? Back to what we saw before, right? In the Eli Rabba, but you'll note, he says, Kalav b'it Yosef b'shem Mordechai, l'tzol mitzvah shar liten matana. Meaning, we're back to that heter. Right, tzorach mitzvah, meaning it's a lower key heter. If you want to go with the Magen Avraham, you say, first define it as a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah to give a present to the person who said the drasha, right? The Shabbos, you're supposed to have a drashat Shabbat HaGadol. I hope you're all giving your Rav a present on Shabbos. So it's a mitzvah to have Kavod Torah on Shabbos for the drasha that everyone only has the time to hear on Shabbos, right? Having said that, the Magen Avraham would say, still you have to do it with a low-key, low-level kinyan, right? Says the Sridesh, continues this line, that is the Ran. So the Sridesh is agreeing with the Beit Meir we saw before. Mikol makom, so Elachush L'dat Mordechai v'Magen Avraham Shosrim who say, if it's a mitzvah, then you can do the low-key, low-level kinyan. מיוש לעיין בחתם סופר שכתב להתיר מתנה לרב הדורש משום שיש בזה משום כבוד תורה וחיבוב מצווה, כן גם בר מצווה יש מקום חיבוב תורה ומצוות. You want to make the bar mitzvah boy happy, not just, in general, you want to make the bar mitzvah boy happy, but you want to make him happy about joining the world of keeping mitzvot and the obligation of keeping mitzvot. I really think there's a very big similarity between the Chatan Kala that you have to make happy because they're accepting very tremendous and big obligations. And we have to tell them, like, no, this is a happy thing. This is a fun thing. Like, yes, there's a lot of commitment here, and it's not so simple, but it'll be good. Here's a present, right? Or let's go for a dance, or let's have a drink, right? That's what you do with the Chatan Kala. Similarly, the Sridesh says, so that's a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah because we need to encourage building Batim Nemanim B'Yisrael. But the Sridesh says same goes for a bar mitzvah, right? He's going into the world of mitzvot. He should be happy with that. So currently, right? We have two veins, I'd say, right? Two heterim of giving the presents to the darshan, bar mitzvah boy, chasen kala on Shabbos. One direction says the Beit Meir and what the Surdeish really thinks. The Ran is right. You're just handing over a sefer, you're handing over whatever it is, so it's not a problem as long as you're doing a low-level kinyan. Eliyara bar Chosholchan, Chatam Sofer, and second option, Surdeish all say first turn it into a mitzvah. Let's justify this by saying it's a mitzvah for whatever reason, because kavod Torah, because semachatan v'kala, or this kind of chibuva Torah when it comes to a mitzvah boy. Those are the two solutions so far, right? One says you could always do this anyway, and the other has to do with the heter mishum mitzvah. Another direction, those are the simple heter. Chatam Sofer says, "Rov ha'pa'amim kvar yichdu kelim erev Shabbat, ma sherotzim lishloach machar lachacham, kivan she'afrish kvar yatsa mirshut ba'alav u'mishum dirichtiv beficha tzedakah, ken ma she'noten achar kach b'Shabbat eno lo lefarsom milta," meaning you already did the kinyan before Shabbos. Now, you might argue, did I do the kinyan before Shabbos, or are you just assuming that this is a kinyan? Do you mean I should be doing the kinyan before Shabbos, or do you mean it happened, right? Because he seems to imply that it happened. Why did it happen? Because if you have a darshan, chazaka, that he doesn't have a lot of money, right? Or at least it's a mitzvah to mechabed the Torah. Since that's that kind of mitzvah, it has a din of beficha zot tzedakah, that once you say it, it's already, the kinyan already happened, right? Amirato gavah k'msirato lehediot, and beficha zot tzedakah, that's those two are connected. The bottom line of Chatam Sofer, again, the Chatam Sofer is skipping a stage, and that's why it's important for me to point out there's a two-step thing. The first step is to say, do the kinyan before Shabbos, and then you hand it over, right? Duran says, do the kinyan on Shabbos by handing it over. Chatam Sofer says, I don't want to samech on the Ran in that sense, but if you do the kinyan before Shabbos, it's definitely not a problem, right? I exchange the ownership from me, from the Gabbai, from the Shul, to the Bar Mitzvah boy, to the Chas and Kala, wherever it is, before Shabbos, and then on Shabbos, I'm just handing over something that's already theirs. They just weren't aware of it. Now, Chatam Sofer asks himself, wait, but do people do this? Not so much. Okay, so how do I solve that? And then he has the solution that says, well, if you're giving it to a darshan, you're giving it to a couple who don't have so much money and need to get on their feet, etc. So I can justify saying that just saying you're going to give it to them already makes it theirs. But that's the second step. It's just important to realize the Chatam Sofer, this isn't the main point. The main point is I did the kinyan before Shabbos. I have the book here. I'm going to give the Bar Mitzvah boy. I'm going to give it the Bar Mitzvah boy. Whose is it? It's already his. I just need to give it to him technically. Giving it technically is not a problem on Shabbos. Right? You have to do Hashavat Avodah on Shabbos. Right? As long as there's no Eruv and Tiltul problem. Right? You have to do Hashavat Avodah on Shabbos. So the Chatam Sofer says that's the main point. Then he has to solve the technical issue that people don't do the kinyan before Shabbos. What he's saying fundamentally is do the kinyan before Shabbos, right? Srideish takes this and says, Tov asa, k'otorto sheneg lomar l'shamash, שיזכה לקטן ערב שבת קודש. ויש עצה אחרת שאומר לבר מצווה שלא יתכוון לקנות בשבת אלא אחר שבת קודש. וזה יוצא לכל הדעות, אפילו של מחמירים ביותר. So he says two opposite options. One option is to do the kinyan before Shabbos. The other option is to do the kinyan after Shabbos, right? So you could do the kinyan before Shabbos. So the Chatam Sofer, as I said, he suggested and proposed a solution that says you actually did the kinyan. You don't even need to do anything special. Srideish says it's much better if we actually tell him to do the kinyan. Just do the kinyan before Shabbos, and then it's his. If you forgot, tell the Bar Mitzvah boy, just take it home with you, and it's not yours. After Shabbos, pick it up, and it'll be yours then, right? And that way we avoid the problem. Hold on, I'm going to look at your comments in a moment, but just okay. Just to finish this point, it says I'll read the Ravadi and then we'll sum up the options we said. המנהג שנהגו להעניק מתנה מטעם הנהלת בית הכנסת לחתן הבר מצווה בשבת, יש להם לסמוך. חנך להם לישראל, מכל מקום נכון יותר שגם בבית הכנסת. יזכה לו מתנה מערב שבת על ידי אחר, באופן שיגביה את המתנה, ויאמר, אני זוכה לו לפלוני מתנה זו, חיים עלן זכין אדם שלו בפניו, וכן יש לנהוג בכל מתנה שאדם רוצה להעניק לחברו בשבת וביום טוב, שיזכה אותה מערב שבת, ואז מותר לקנה לחברו בשבת, אם אין עליה תורת מוקצה, וכזה ראוי לעשות. So just to go through the 3.5 solutions we had here, the one solution is to go with the Ran and say, if you're handing something over to someone, you're just handing it by hand, it's not a problem at all, as the Beit Meir says, and that's what, right, based on the Ran, the previous Ran, and what the Sridesh thinks is the truth, right? As we said, Mikal Din, you are allowed to do this. The next stage, the next step is to say you are allowed to do it in that way because it's a mitzvah, and then it's the Bach, like the Bach and Magen Avraham we saw previously, right? The Mordechai with the Ran, right? Turn it into, say it's a mitzvah, justify calling it a mitzvah, and then just hand it over. That's Eli Rabbi, Chazolchan, Chatam Sofer. And then that's the second. The other option is to do the kinyan before Shabbos or after Shabbos, where the Chatam Sofer either before the Gabbai Makneh, before the person who received it, right? The recipient of the present will only receive it, but won't actually have kavanah to do a kinyan. And the Chatam Sofer says sometimes this happens anyway. Sometimes you can justify saying that the kinyan happened on its own before Shabbos anyway.